This is Sherman Sizeman, a proud coal miner from West Virginia. Known for his booming laughter and unshakable faith, he had spent decades underground mining coal to support his family and community. But everything changed on the 19th of January 2006. He went from being a pillar in his community to a deranged paranoid lunatic. On that afternoon, him and his wife Ruby were sitting at home, just hanging out and doing their own thing, where out of the blue, Sherman stands up and starts screaming. He startled his wife Ruby that she also started screaming and wondering what was going on, but she couldn't see anything. So she turns to her husband and asks him, "What is it? What is it? What are you so scared of?" But he just kept staring straight as if something was scaring him. And although the screaming had stopped, he just kept staring straight, his eyes filled with terror, as if whatever he was looking at had kept him in a trance, and his mouth was still wide open. The wife, being confused and not knowing what else to do, she holds on to her husband, telling him, "Come back to me, please come back to me." And when he comes to, he looks at his wife and tells her, "Please don't ever leave me again or they'll kill me." And she manages to calm him down, hoping he stays that way. The next morning, she informs his family, and when they come over, Sherman refused to let them in, telling his wife that they were going to bury him alive, and the only person he could trust around him was his wife. Ruby had never seen this kind of behavior from her husband before. He was acting like a completely different person. He had become incredibly paranoid. His family didn't know what was going on or what to do. Little did they know there was a specific reason for Sherman's sudden change. A few weeks before January 19, Sherman had been complaining of intense abdominal pain, and after a while he decided to go to the hospital. And the doctor who examined and ran some tests on him determined that it was his gallbladder that was the issue. But to be 100% sure, the doctor recommended that he had to undergo an exploratory surgery for them to literally open up his gallbladder and see what was going on. After discussing it with his wife and daughter, Sherman finally decided to undergo the surgery. So on the morning of the 19th of January, Sherman went to the hospital with his wife and daughter completely normal. When he gets to the hospital, he gets prepped for surgery and wheeled into the operating room. He was lively and was chatting with the nurses as they were setting up for the surgery. And at some point, one of the nurses places an oxygen mask on his face, so the anesthesiologist could administer a 2-drug cocktail that would knock him out for surgery. But something went terribly wrong. The anesthesiologist had made a huge mistake. He only administered one of the 2 drugs needed for the anesthesia. He administered the paralyzing drug, but did not administer the actual anesthetic that would knock him out and, most importantly, get rid of the pain. When Sherman realized that he was paralyzed but not knocked out and could still feel, the feeling of terror overwhelmed him. But he couldn't move or talk because his vocal cords were paralyzed also, so he could not alert the medical personnel who were about to start the surgery. But he realized he could still move his eyes, so he started blinking rapidly, but no one noticed because his eyes were sealed shut with a tape. But the tape moved slightly enough for him to see the doctors as they were about to start the surgery. Sherman felt every incision, every tug, the opening and clipping of his chest, the moving around of his organs, but he couldn't scream or move. It was a silent nightmare being trapped within his own body, and at some point, all Sherman wanted was to die. At some point, a nurse notices Sherman staring at her with terror-filled eyes, and with shock she screams, "Stop! He's awake." With surprise and confusion, the surgeon calls in the anesthesiologist to come resolve the issue, and the anesthesiologist quickly pumps Sherman full with painkillers, finally knocking him out. And in that moment, the anesthesiologist remembered that he had made a horrible mistake when administering the drug cocktail earlier, and the patient had failed every bit of 16 minutes of surgery and would most likely remember and sue the hospital. So what happened next is unclear. If everyone in the theater that day was in agreement or the anesthesiologist worked alone, he went on to administer an amnesia drug so that Sherman would forget everything that had happened during surgery. The team went on to finish the surgery, and when Sherman woke up in the recovery room, he did not remember what had happened to him. At least not cautiously. But the horrible experience had been implanted in his subconscious. Basically, his body remembered that he had experienced extreme trauma. However, the amnesia wiped away the memory of how he had received that trauma. So there was a big disconnect in his memory. Sherman couldn't articulate the horror he had endured. And once he had left the hospital, The once lively man was consumed with paranoia and despair.
He spoke of invincible tormentors and relived the surgery in his mind. He would get flashbacks of 16 minutes of torture that he went through. He could see people cutting him up and opening his chest and sucking things out of him. And when he would get these flashbacks, he didn't think to himself, this happened to me, that's why I feel this way. Instead, he thought it was a horrible nightmare he just couldn't escape from. His family noticed the shift, but they just couldn't understand the extent of his suffering. Although they got professional doctors, therapists, there was nothing anyone could do. Sherman had become the subject of a tragic medical oversight that revealed the fatality of even the strongest souls. So one February morning, Sherman left his home without saying a word to anyone. The weight of his unspoken trauma had become too unbearable. That day, he ended his own life, leaving behind questions, pain, and a plea for better awareness of anesthesia-related traumas. After his passing, his family kept on investigating, and they would finally get their hands on Sherman's medical report from the gallbladder exploratory surgery. And after giving it to another doctor to go over it, the doctor discovered that Sherman had in fact experienced 16 minutes of something known as anesthesia awareness, a rare condition where the body is paralyzed, yet the mind is fully conscious. Shockingly, this happens to 20,000 people a year. Sherman's family went on to sue the hospital and will be awarded an undisclosed amount in 2008. Bye guys.